Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with okjersey.com. Looking for football shirts? Head over to okjersey.com and enter the discount code Harry for 8% off. Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're all feeling a little bit better about what we saw on Sunday. It's been a really tough one to process, hasn't it? It's something that cut deep, at least for me. I've seen some of the reaction from other podcasters, journalists, fans online, etc., etc. And it's clearly a result that has messed with our heads a little bit. It's clearly a result that we're struggling to cope with. I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but for me, it's the performance that sort of created that stress more so than the outcome. I think the outcome was obviously bad, and it saw us have our lead at the top of the Premier League reduced, and there's no sort of getting away from that. But I just feel like what I saw performance-wise, coupled with what we've seen in the last two Premier League games, is what's really set the alarm bells ringing, and what's got people asking the question, are Arsenal actually going to see this thing through? Or are Arsenal going to end up crumbling when it really matters? Are they going to be, squashed by the pressure? Are they going to falter? There's 15 Premier League games to go. There's a long way to go. And I've always said it, when people were telling me just a week or so ago that Arsenal were going to win the Premier League title and that it was done and dusted and there was no chance of them messing it up from here, I kept saying it's football. You don't know that. You can't possibly know that. Football is unpredictable in its nature. That's why we love it in part. This idea that we were just going to stroll to the Premier League title without any bumps in the road was a fanciful one. And I think we've all had a bit of a reality check over the course of the last 48 hours or so. What are we going to do on today's pod? Well, I think moaning and complaining is the easiest thing to do in a situation like this. And I'm not judging anybody for moaning or complaining because I've done loads of it myself, okay, since that game. I did loads of it during that game, okay? I'm not telling people how to feel. I'm not judging anybody for being upset, for being distraught, for being disappointed, or for having a bit of a wobble in confidence around whether or not this Arsenal team are going to go on to achieve what we should achieve this season. But I think at some point, with any mistake, with any error, with any setback, you have to draw a line under it and move forward. Okay, we keep talking about mentality. We keep asking the question, does this squad, does this group have the stomach for a Premier League title fight? Do they have the minerals to go on and win this thing? Well, if they do, they've got to show it to us now. And as fans, we're going to be emotional and there's going to be that PTSD and it's probably going to last a little bit longer for us, right? But for the guys that have the power to put it right, and that's the players, that's the manager, that's those working behind the scenes at the football club, they can't afford to dwell on what happened against Manchester United at the weekend. A line must be drawn underneath it. And the easiest thing to do in a situation like this would be to keep on moaning, to keep on complaining, to keep on trying to attribute the blame. But actually what we need to be focused on now is how we fix it. Arsenal have a problem. That's undeniable. So today, we're going to talk about how we go about fixing it. Now, in order to fix any problem, you need to identify what the problem is. Now, if I was to sit and write a list of all the things that I think are wrong with this Arsenal team based on what we've seen over the last 3 games in the Premier League and based on what we've seen for a few years, I'd probably write quite a bit down. And that's not because we haven't been good, but it's because we're striving for perfection. We know what it takes in terms of points tallies and consistency to win these things. We've not quite been able to reach that height ourselves, but we've seen Liverpool do it. We've seen Manchester City do it. Okay. For me, there's a few things that I've picked out that I think are the kind of top line issues. And until we deal with those, until we tackle those problems, I can't see us improving enough to go through the rest of the season as comfortably as one can hope for during a Premier League title push. Okay, so we'll start breaking those down. We'll work our way through them. If you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video. That really, really does help. So if you're joining us on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, and all the rest of it. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do get involved as well. Leave us a review. That really, really does help. And if you're interested in becoming a patron, there is a brand spanking new Patreon pod that dropped just before we went live, where we tackle the question of, are Arsenal going to bottle it this season? And the reason we focused on that was because I felt like I had my thoughts in order. I felt like I was ready to kind of give my opinion on that, my honest opinion on that, because it's a question that in my line of work, you can expect to be asked quite often. I was asked probably about 15 times yesterday over the course of the day. So, yeah, go and listen to that. Go and check it out. We bring you a Patreon piece after every single game, which is in addition to the main pod. If you want to become a patron, you can sign up for just £3 a month. And with that £3, you get access to all of our bonus content. You get all the main pods ad-free. Plus, you get access to our Discord server as well, which has been very helpful to me in terms of therapy, I would say, ever since that game on Sunday. Right, shall we start to break down then? You know, actually what, before we break down some of my points, I just want to have a look at what some of you guys are saying in the live chat. Afsar, pretty clear. He says, Arsenal have a problem, so how do we fix it? Quoting the title of the pod. I like what you've done there. And then he says, score more goals and create more. Yeah, that's where we need to get to. That's the destination at which we want to arrive. But how do we get there is what I want to focus on today. Will Dobson said, sorry, like I shouldn't laugh at this, but it is quite funny. Speaking of Arteta's cautionary nature, someone said the other day that he likely wears a life jacket in the bath. Listen, it's all good humored banter. Life jacket in the bath. I did see one from Flex, who's a Man United supporter, a colleague of mine over on TalkSport 2. That he shared. There he goes. Someone said that Arteta stops at red lights when playing GTA. That's good banter. I'll give you that. That's good banter. Tebow says we should go back to basics with Marino at 9 and Eza at 10. Or is this my revisionism getting the upper hand? Please consult me because my head's gone. The Marino point is an interesting one. I'm going to make a note of it. I know sometimes I make notes and then I forget to come back to stuff. Please nudge me if I forget. The Marino up front point. I do want to touch on that because I was thinking a bit about that yesterday as well. Deflected Mind says, Harry, maybe we have to make peace with the fact that we might never win anything with Arteta. Look how horribly we play. We can't score goals in open play. There's no guarantee in football. Okay, there's no guarantee that you're going to win. There's no guarantee that you're going to achieve what you set out to achieve. But what I will say on Arteta is we are much closer to winning than we were for years and years and years prior to his arrival. And when I say winning things, I'm not talking about an FA Cup or a League Cup, which I'm not downplaying, by the way. Arsene Wenger did a really good job in the second half of his tenure of picking up some FA Cups, during a period where Arsenal was struggling, generally speaking. So I'm not downplaying those. Mikel Arteta's won an FA Cup as well. So that's another point to add to your sort of your comment there. But I think we've come so far that, at least not now, at least at this stage, I'm not willing to throw the towel in. Okay. If we get to the end of the season potless, then I think we have to have a conversation about whether or not this thing's ever going to get over the line. This, with the squad that we built, with the summer business that we did, was the season where the expectation levels just shot right up. And as a result of that, anything less than success becomes something that is unacceptable. And therefore, we would have to have that conversation, wouldn't we? But at this stage, I'm not in January going to sit here and say, maybe we have to make peace with the fact that we're never going to win anything under Arteta. I don't think that's the attitude to have. And so people feel like that, and they're well within their rights to feel like that. And, I'm not, again, as I've said right at the top of the pod, I'm not going to judge people for how they feel or, the nervousness and anxiety that they're feeling at this moment in time. But I just think if you're that group of players okay, you can't afford to allow that kind of doubt to creep into your mindset. You've got to be focused. You've got to be, confident, and you've got to push. And you can't push if you start looking in the mirror and having thoughts like, maybe we're never going to win anything under Mikel Arteta. I don't think that's the way to view it. But thank you for your comment. I'll just take this one first from Samuel, who says, what we just need to do is go back to our earlier formation when Odegaard was injured. Gid says, I get what you're saying, Harry, but doubt this manager will change his system. He's for inside forwards out wide and fullbacks that are centre-backs in the pockets. Odegaard and Zubi can't play together. Interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting comments coming through in the chat box. James Nichols, I know people are trying to get me to say, Arteta out if we don't win anything. What I'm going to say at this stage, and this is genuinely, legitimately how I feel, because I was asked a question yesterday about Mikel Arteta's contract. Okay, I was working on a show yesterday, which I think is probably going to be out today. I'll share the link when it comes out. But people were asking me about Mikel Arteta's contract. Now, Mikel Arteta's current deal at Arsenal is due to expire in June 2027. So there's about, 18 months left on it, something like that. I wouldn't be offering him a new deal now. I just wouldn't. Like, I would want to wait until the end of the season. And does that put us in a precarious position as a football club, letting our manager's contract run into the final year? Maybe. But I don't think that you should be worried about that right now. And I also don't think that Mikel Arteta should be bothered by that at this stage and at this moment in time. He's got to be focused on the task at hand, which is getting this Arsenal team over the line. So this idea that right now we should be trying to plan or determine what Mikel Arteta's future and relationship with Arsenal looks like beyond this season, I think is wrong. And I know that you can get caught asleep, right? Liverpool got caught napping with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he ends up leaving in a cut price deal, and that cuts deep and it hurts. And you look back and you say, why didn't the club do this and why didn't the club do that? But I think at this stage, where we're about to find out if indeed this project is going to go bang or if it's just going to fall away, okay, at this stage, we can't be distracted. We can't be distracted by what's gone on before because we can't change that now. We have to focus on the future. And we also can't be distracted about individual people's situations, whether that's players or the manager himself. If we get to the end of the season potless, we have to have a serious conversation about whether or not this thing's ever going to get to the stage that we need it to. We have to review why, if it doesn't, it didn't get there. And if we think that another manager would put us in a better position to take that next step, that's not to diminish or dismiss all the brilliance from Mikel Arteta so far and how he's transformed the club and got us to this point again, but you would have to review it at that point and at that time. So I'm not saying keep him unconditionally, but I'm also not saying sack him. I think we need to conduct a review. Obviously, if he doesn't win anything this season, it's going to be harder for him to defend that, given the investment again, given the size of the squad, given that he got most of what he wanted in the summer. And we're now in a place where, it's kind of, it's on the players too. And I made the point yesterday that I feel like sometimes we give the players a free pass when actually they're the ones that have the actual talent and the actual capability of influencing stuff and the finer details. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's move into then some of my points, shall we? So first point number one, I feel like the midfield balance is off. I think a lot of people are focusing on our forward line, right? And I understand why, because that is an issue at this moment in time. Those guys are not producing, they're not scoring enough goals, and we'll come on to talk about that a little bit later on in the pod, I'm sure. But for me right now, the midfield balance is off. Okay, we're not finding that balance right now between, first of all, controlling the game in the way that Mikel Arteta wants, in terms of territory, in terms of safety, but we're also But when we do that, we don't have the creative spark. And so what happens is that you start to look at it and you think this becomes a more functional midfield than flair-based midfield. And when you're facing low blocks, which is what we faced most of the time, and I'm not saying that's what we came up against Manchester United. They were a bit more aggressive. They played with more of a mid-block, I thought, at times, and they jumped out at us when the time was right. But if you go for control, what's your definition of control? Because I think Mikel Arteta's definition of control is a lot to do with safety, whereas mine is, a bit more of a balance between that safety element, which I think is important in this league. And it's why we have, generally speaking, such a good defensive record. But also, you need to be able to use the midfield in your attacking play. You need to be able to work the ball through the lines early, quickly. You need to be able to create the types of situations in which your forwards can thrive. And I don't think we do enough of that. So for me, the midfield balance is off. Now, how do you fix that? That's the kind of big golden question here. Some people say, get Martin Odegaard out of the team and put Eberechi Eza in. And it's very, very hard to argue against Martin Odegaard being dropped right now, because he was really, really poor, I thought, with the exception of that first 20 minutes against Manchester United, but so was everybody else. The thing with Odegaard is that he's hit incredible heights at Arsenal in the past in terms of consistency of performance, that now we're looking at a player that isn't consistent at all. And I'm not saying there haven't been the odd good games sprinkled here and there over the course of the last year, but generally speaking, his levels declined and it's dropped. And I don't know exactly what I put that down to. Like, is it him? Is he physically not quite at it? Is it a lack of confidence? Or is it the system? Is it what's going on around him? Is that influencing him? Is that impacting him? Are we platforming Martin Odegaard to be the best version of Martin Odegaard? That will kind of be my next question with regards to the Norwegian, because what I see when I watch him now is a player that's constantly dropping deeper. He's a player that's constantly picking up the ball in areas where he cannot affect the game in the way that we want him to, in the way that he has done in the past. Now, for Martin Odegaard to be dropping into those positions, surely there's an instruction to do so, right? If there's not a specific instruction saying, Martin, you need to drop deep and you need to get on the ball here, there, and there, then there is certainly an element of this obsession with control that is forcing or making Martin Odegaard believe that he has to go into those areas in order for Arsenal to have solid and secure possession of the ball. So, Odegaard, Eza, none of them are doing what they should be doing. And it's why I was so frustrated that we let Ethan Nwaneri go, because at this moment in time, do you know what? If I was picking a team, I'd drop both of them. I wouldn't pick either of them. I would pick Ethan Nwaneri right now, because I feel like he can be that sort of box of dynamite in and around the opposition's box. He can twist, he can receive it on the half turn, he can get a shot off with minimal space, with minimal backlift. These are all the things that Ethan Nwaneri is really, really good at doing. And we're not seeing any of those things from Odegaard or Eza. And people keep going after Odegaard because he's the captain. And when you're the captain, there's a higher expectation of you. You have a responsibility. I understand that. But where I'm struggling, and this is not just the case with Arsenal's midfield, this is the case in multiple positions right now, is you keep saying take X player out, but the one that you're talking about bringing in is also not doing anything or enough. Let me rephrase that. So for example, take Martin Odegaard off the other day against Manchester United. Eberechi Eza comes on and does nothing. You take, and I'm not, obviously Bukayo Saka stayed on the other day, but if you take Bukayo Saka off and you bring Noni Madueke on, most of the time, you're not getting any more productivity out of him. Sometimes you take Trossard off because it's not really his day and it's not really working for him, and you bring on Martinelli and there's not that level of productivity. So my point being that, yes, on paper, we have a really, really deep squad, but there is a real problem with underperformance across the board at this moment in time. And, these players didn't all turn bad overnight. That's where you can root this back to coaching, to the management, to the environment. And I think that's where Mikel Arteta does deserve some stick, because ultimately, as a manager, it is your responsibility to get the maximum out of the players that you have at your disposal. So if we then break it down specifically to Eze and Odegaard, because let's just finish off the midfield part, right? We're talking about the midfield balance being off. Okay. Eze plays higher up when he plays in the 10 role. It slightly adjusts and changes the shape of the rest of our midfield. In my opinion, it means that Rice and Zubimendi have to play more like a double pivot, which I'm fine with and I quite like. But Eze can get lost in games. If you can't get the ball into his feet on the edge of the penalty area, you're not getting anything else. You're not getting an intensity when it comes to pressing. You're not getting the same level of work off the ball as you get from Martin Odegaard, but you have a player that can be more devastating, I would argue, in that final third, if and when you can work it to him. The problem is that we don't do that often enough. Okay. So that the benefit versus the drawback of Eberechi Eze is something that you got to weigh up when you're picking your team or when you're thinking about the specific challenges that any one opponent gives you, right? And then you look at Odegaard, who I think can play that final pass, can get shots off, can make things happen in the final third, just like Eberechi Eze. But the problem when Martin Odegaard plays is that he's never in the final third. He keeps dropping deep. So what has to happen to stop that? Do you have to say to Zubimendi and Rice, even when Martin Odegaard's playing, you're still playing as a double pivot? The defensive responsibility and the control responsibility, the control element is on you. Because as much as I love Declan Rice when he gets forward and he powers and he motors into the opposition's half and he's got a great set piece delivery and all the rest of it, I'd rather have Martin Odegaard trying to pick out intricate passes from the edge of the opposition's box than I would Declan Rice. So maybe a reset is required in terms of the identifying of each midfielder's specific roles and responsibilities. I think that needs to happen, because if that happens and people are maybe a little bit clearer, I think we've got our wires crossed. I think it's all a little bit too confusing. There's too many rotations. There's too much, trying to make the opponent second guess you. And I suppose that comes down to overcoaching, which a lot of people feel is an issue right now at Arsenal. But that's kind of my take on it. Arteta, for me, has to pull everyone in. He has to sit everyone down. He has to decide what he wants the dynamic of his midfield to look like. And he has to redistribute the roles and responsibilities of that midfield to try and give us a better balance. So that's one of my problems. Midfield balance. It's not right. It's not what we need it to be at this moment in time. Look, we're going to continue. We've got more to discuss. We're going to keep trying to figure out how we fix Arsenal's current issues here on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Short pause and we'll be back in just a moment.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really do appreciate it. It's great to have so many of you with us on this Tuesday morning. I know it's a difficult time for Arsenal fans at the moment, which is wild to say when you think we're 4 points clear at the top of the Premier League. We're top of the Champions League. We're in the League Cup semi-final with a lead going into the second leg. We're in the FA Cup, etc., etc. But what happened on Sunday, it hurt. It's left scars, right? I just want to dive into the chat box and take a few of your comments because there's been some great stuff coming through. Video React says it is Arteta's system flaws more than the players. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Gid says, as much as I get into Odegaard, he's an 8. If you want to play him, you've got to play him deep with Declan and have Eze ahead of him. Odegaard and Zubi both occupy the same spaces. I think they do at the moment, but I don't think it has to be like that, is kind of my point. If you sit Martin Odegaard down and say, Martin, I want you to do your work in the final third, then he should do that. And he's got to resist that temptation to drop deep and to get sucked in. But that requires positional discipline from the other two as well. And I think what we've done this season, and I'm going to come on to talk about something very, very similar with the fullbacks, is we've tried to introduce, in my personal opinion, too many rotations. Overcoaching is a problem for me at this stage. So yeah, we'll We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Salim says that Rice and Zubimendi isn't working. Majin says Rice and Odegaard don't work. I hate to say it. We play way better attacking football without Rice as an 8. He needs to be the 6. Interesting. Deflected Mind says, I feel Odegaard is being played out of position. He's a Cesc playing in a Xavi position. Yeah, but why? Is the point that I keep coming back to on that. Why isn't he playing further forward? Is he being told to come back? Is he conscious of the holes being left by the other two and their tendency to roam? I'm not. People are going to take it as if I'm trying to absolve Martin Odegaard of any blame. I'm not. I'm just trying to drill down and get to the bottom of why we've seen a change in behaviors, if you like, when it comes to some of our midfield players. Anyway, we've talked about that midfield dynamic. Let's talk about this idea of platforming the fullbacks. This is something we've seen more and more and more. And I think the reason we got to this point is because we were struggling to free up our wingers often enough. We were struggling to create space for our wingers to do their work. So what have we done? We've tried to find an alternative way of attacking those half spaces that's maybe a little bit more difficult to track. Now, I'll explain why pushing your fullbacks into those half spaces is harder to deal with than pushing your 2 8s into those spaces, because your fullbacks are coming from one line further, right? One line further back. So in order to track that fullback, it's not about a midfielder dropping 10, 15 yards anymore. It's now about a winger dropping 50, 60 yards. And that's where it becomes more problematic for the opposition. And if we're being honest, we do see Julian Timber, when he plays at right back at the moment, getting some really good positions. When Ricardo Calafiori plays on the left, we also see him get into some really good, exciting attacking positions. But the prioritization of platforming our fullbacks over our wingers, that's all wrong for me. Because your wingers, in theory, are more competent attacking players. Okay? They are players that, made a career of being devastating in the final third versus players that made a career at fullback. In fact, in our case, players that made a career at centre-back who have now been converted into fullbacks, and now we're trying to push them forward one more step in their evolution, if you like, and turn them into attacking players, which just isn't going to work with all of them. It works well with Calafiori, for instance, because he's got this amazing ability to influence games in the attacking third in a way that not many defenders do. But I guess my point here is that in our quest for more space, in our quest for a solution to low blocks, we've maybe gone so far outside of the box in terms of our thinking that it's actually turning out to be counterproductive. That's my kind of hypothesis at the moment, right? That we have got to find a way of platforming some of our attacking players. We've almost given up on trying to platform the wingers because we just don't see a way of doing that. And now we're platforming our fullbacks. And it's great from time to time to see our fullbacks get into those spaces and into those positions and really see us be aggressive and force the issue. We all moan that we're not aggressive enough as a team at times. They are very aggressive in their positioning and what they do. But somewhere in our sort of move towards that, we've lost the focus on the players that, we actually do need to platform. And maybe when I say that we're not performing in an attacking sense across the board, maybe this is something to do with that. Now that I'm kind of thinking out loud, that I'm processing my thoughts, maybe that's something to do with that. Maybe the fact that, for example, we're so focused on Timber getting into those positions and platforming that is why it's not just Saka that's not scoring. It's Madueke, it's Trossard, it's Martinelli not scoring enough, it's Eze not scoring enough, it's Odegaard not scoring enough. Maybe there's something in that. Maybe we've just overcomplicated things and we need to go back to basics a little bit. I got to be honest, when I was coming away from the game on Sunday, I listened to the Arsenal Vision instant reaction pod. And It's always a fantastic listen. Patrons on the Arsenal Vision get access to that. I love it. It's one of my favorite bits of Arsenal content out there, because I love the fact that when I'm working on the game and I'm obviously held back a little bit, doing a bit of work, doing the interviews, whatever, by the time I walk to my car, it's ready for me to listen to, which I love. And Clive Palmer said something on the instant reaction. I love Clive. I think he's great. I always really sort of listen to what he has to say, and I always really respect his opinions, even if at times I disagree with him. He said that this was a game where we needed to, and I know I'm digressing from our wider problems to this game for just a minute, but hear me out. There is a point to this. He said that this was a game where we needed to go back to basics, right? Where we needed to think about how we win the game physically. These are the basic principles that we have nailed that have made us a really strong team in recent times, okay? And he said this was a game for that, not for overcomplicating it. And I sort of came away listening to that, and I thought, no, I kind of disagree, Clive. I kind of think that, no, for a long time we've looked at this Arsenal team and said it's physical, it's powerful, but it's lacked a bit of quality, and it's lacked a bit of, of guile at times. And we add a little bit more of that to our ranks, and now we're saying go back to basics and be physical. I felt at the time that was a bit revisionist. But now that I'm sort of talking about all these different elements and aspects, I do think that the sentence of going back to basics is actually really relevant here. Not quite in the same way that Clive does. He was talking about picking your physical players, picking your dual winners, etc., etc. I'm talking about just asking wingers to play like wingers, and asking fullbacks to play like fullbacks, and asking attacking midfielders to stay high up the pitch and close to your centre forward. So we're both kind of saying that basics are required, and that's where we should be looking in terms of returning to that, but I think in slightly different ways. So I've talked about the fullbacks. We don't have, this is the final thing that I'm going to mention before I make a couple of other points, and then we take your questions and thoughts from the live chat. So I talked about midfield balance. I talked about platforming the fullbacks over the wingers, which I don't like at the moment. The other thing I want to talk about is lack of a top striker. Whether people like it or not, despite the business that we did in the summer, we are still without a top striker. Okay, I got a lot of crap from people in the comments after the Man United game because I said Jesus should start over Victor Gyökeres. What was our best period in the game? It was the first 20, 25 minutes. Who was playing up front during that period? Gabriel Jesus. And while I do not place all of our issues on Sunday or want to go after Victor Gyökeres for his appearance off the bench on Sunday, we weren't any better when he came on. And that's a general point that I want to make about all the subs on Sunday, okay? We weren't any better when Madueke came on. We weren't any better when Eze come on. We weren't any better when, when we made all those changes, with the exception of one. The only change that made us better was Marino on. That was the only one. So people are frustrated because they look at this squad and they see depth and they see quality and they see great names on the substitutes bench. But when those names are then required to do more than just be a name on a team sheet and they're not doing it, that makes you think, well, hold on a minute. How good is this squad? Now, I'm not saying it's not good, but it's only right that there's a bit of doubt and there are questions being asked about some of those players, which then goes back to recruitment. We all thought our recruitment in the summer was great. Over the course of the season, I would argue that some of that recruitment hasn't been as impactful, I beg your pardon, as I thought it might be. Victor Gyökeres hasn't been as impactful. Eberechi Eze hasn't been as impactful. Okay? And that's just a couple of them. And people keep saying, you keep trying to play up Gabriel Jesus in order to prove your point on Victor Gyökeres. No, I'm not doing that at all. Okay? I'm just going by the eye test. Victor Gyökeres, his touch isn't good enough. His control's not there. And I've said these things consistently for months now. So please don't pretend as if I'm trying to scapegoat Victor Gyökeres for what's happened in the last 3 games. I'm talking about generally speaking. Without Kai Havertz, and you could even argue that Kai Havertz isn't a top-level striker, although I would argue he's more well-rounded than the other two that we're talking about. But we still don't have a top striker. And so is it a massive and major surprise that Arsenal aren't scoring goals? Like, is that a major surprise? I know football's not as simplistic as saying, if you've got a top striker, you're going to win everything. I know that's not how it works. But if goals are a problem and you don't have a sort of reliable goal source, which we don't at this moment in time, why are we surprised by it? I made the point yesterday, not a single Premier League player, okay, not a single Arsenal player, I beg your pardon, Premier League player, they're all Premier League players, not a single Arsenal player has managed to score more than 5 Premier League goals this season. That's not good. That's not good at all. There's a point in the chat box from Rumble who says, scored more goals than Jesus, mate. Obviously talking about Gyökeres. And Video React says, the issue is more than Gyökeres. It is. This is my 4th point of 5 that I'm making, okay? This is my 4th point of 5. So clearly, I don't think it's one player or one issue. I think it's a number of things. But you're saying Victor Gyökeres has scored more goals. He's got 9 goals this season across all competitions. He's played 1,800 minutes. Gabriel Jesus hasn't even played 500, and he's got 3. So if you times Gabriel Jesus's minutes by goals, right? So if let's say that roughly Victor Gyökeres has played 3.5 times more, if you times Gabriel Jesus's goal ratio by 3.5 times, it would be more than Victor Gyökeres's. Okay, my point is not go after one or the other. That's never been my intention. I'm just highlighting what I see. And I think that, people, I don't understand. For years and years and years, I've been told by fellow Arsenal fans, where are your standards? Now that we've got the squad, I'm holding the players to account. And I'm holding the manager to account as well. If you've just joined us, I have talked about overcoaching. I have talked about us overcomplicating the system. I have talked about us platforming the wrong players. These are all things that are at the manager's door, okay? But if we're talking about standards, then we have to maintain those standards right across the board. And not just because you feel sorry for Victor Gyökeres because he runs a lot and works hard, does it mean that you should drop those standards? I don't understand why we're at that place. Look, I do want to talk about one other point that I heard on the Sports Illustrated show. My great friend Jacob Colshaw was hosting that yesterday, and Phil Jones was the guest on there. And he made a really interesting point, actually, about Mikel Arteta. And I'm not sure if I fully agree with this, but I wanted to share it with you guys and engage your kind of thoughts on this. So let me know in the comments what you think about this. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he was talking about how Arsenal looked a bit panicked against Man United, how Arsenal didn't look as calm and composed as they should do, given their position and the season that they've had versus Manchester United. He said that he feels that one of the reasons there is that panic, that anxiety, that desperation to do everything quickly, which sometimes leads to mistakes, etc., is because Mikel Arteta on the touchline is giving that vibe. Mikel Arteta is constant. He's marching up and down the technical area. He's pointing, he's shouting, he's screaming, he's gesticulating, he's doing it all, right? As a player, when you look over and you see that intensity coming off the sidelines, I'd imagine that in moments where your intensity drops and you need to bring it back up, that can be helpful. If he's giving it, that kind of is the kind of behavior that you can sort of feed off, and it's a reminder to you that your intensity level needs to rise. But does Mikel at times need to rein it in a little bit? Would a calmer Mikel on the sidelines bring more calm on the pitch? I'm not sure if it's as black and white as that, personally, but it is a theory that I'm willing to discuss and explore. If he is a little bit calmer, does that transmit? He talks about transmitting all the time. That's a word that he uses all the time. Does a calmer Mikel Arteta transmit more calm onto the pitch and therefore help us when we do need to sort of calm it down? And when we talk about overcoaching, I think this comes into it as well. if he's constantly telling you, stand there, stand here, stand there, stand here, stand there, whether that's the right thing or not, it takes the autonomy away from the player. It takes the power away from the player. And if you take the power away from the player, then when a moment comes along where they do need to use their own brain and they need to do something, off the cuff, there's probably a bit of a hesitance. There's probably a reliance that's developing on Mikel Arteta. And that's not because they're bad players or because they're stupid or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's because you get into habits, don't you? And so if you get the ball in a position that's a little bit unusual and you look up and all of a sudden now you've got to flick from system mode into individual mode and you've got to go on a dribble, you've got to do something individual, you've got to make something happen. Is it difficult to make that switch because everything is so orchestrated? And for people that will say that I'm just coming up with this, Mikel Arteta over coaches stuff now, no, there were points last season. There's a podcast with a title, I think, of Are Arsenal Overcoached? And I talked about how we'd maybe taken some of the spontaneity away from some of our players by eroding at it over a long period of time. And when we went into the summer, I said we needed to sign players that can break the mold. We needed your Ezes, your Maduekes. We get them in and they've turned into what the others were. And so the overcoaching point, I think, is valid. You can never know for certain because we don't know what Mikel's telling them. We don't know what his instructions specifically consist of. We can only go by what the output is. Okay? We can only go by what we see in terms of the end. So we don't know. I know people hate the process word, but we don't know the full process. We can't know that. But at the same time, I think it's a fair assumption to make that we are overcoached, that we are clipping the wings of some of our most creative players, and that it's system first. And system first provides defensive stability, as we've seen at Arsenal for a period of time now. But do we need to drop that a little bit, trust in our players, trust in their talent, and platform them to go and be as free and as spontaneous and therefore as devastating as they can possibly be when it comes to attacking the opposition? The balance has to be better. It just has to be. Okay, I'm going to take a few of your questions from the live chat. So start getting them in the chat box. I'd love to hear what you thought about today's show. Did I make some interesting points or was I just waffling for 42 minutes like normal? Anyway, hit the like button, subscribe, all the rest of it. We'll be back in a very, I was going to say a very short moment. That don't make any sense. We'll be back in like literally 10 seconds. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Your questions next.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Thank you for the super chat. Sniper Scope says, Harry, have you seen City's attacking players last 10? Do you mean their last 10 games? I don't think they've been doing particularly well either. But we're all talking about how they're not being good enough. So why can't we say that about our players? I suppose would be my point there. Jid says, Harry, I would like to do an Odegaard debate. It could be with you or as part of a fan call-in. I've already previewed some of my points in yesterday's pod comments. I feel people don't know the difference between a playmaker and an attacking midfielder, or want us to sacrifice a playmaker just to have one more player taking shots. There is no understanding of what playing without a playmaker is like. Mate, drop me a DM and let's do it. Let's do it. Drop me a DM. Sniper Scope says, would stripping Odegaard as captain help him? Nobody can say that Arteta doesn't know how to play attacking football because he's shown that before. I'm not saying that Arteta doesn't know how to play attacking football. I'm saying that his priorities might be a little bit off in terms of the balance is my sort of overarching feeling on that. Afsar Gunner says, do you think a fully fit Kai Havertz will improve our attack? Absolutely. 100%. Damien says, really need to pay your son his royalties. Mate, when you see how much money I spend on my son, I know it's my responsibility as a parent and all that. I think he gets more than his fair share. But just in Arsenal shirts every season alone, for God's sakes. Dad, I want this kit. Dad, I want that kit. Dad, I want the goalkeeper kit. Who wants the goalkeeper kit? But anyway, Rumble says, who's your local football team, mate? I suppose Enfield Town would be my local football team. Do I follow them? No, not really. Not really. In fact, I don't at all. What else have we got? Deflected Mind says, Harry, if we didn't win one of those big two trophies, do we have a risk of losing players like Saliba after this season? Yeah, we do. Because while as a football club, I think we're doing all the right things in terms of extending people's contracts, giving them new deals, lucrative deals that you'd think in theory are going to keep them happy. Ultimately, the footballing side matters. And they will get to points in their careers where they feel like if we don't get over the line, that they need to start going and winning things. A footballer's career is pretty short. But I think even though the contracts are there and that protects us financially, it doesn't protect us against what comes with a lack of success. And so at some point, William Saliba might say, I want to go. Okay. And even though you're protected financially because of his contract, you're going to get a good fee for him. It doesn't mean he doesn't want to go, and it doesn't mean that someone won't come along and buy him. So this idea that just because you tie these people on a contract means they'll never leave is wrong. What it does is protect you financially, and Arsenal are protecting their assets in that. But you can't protect against years and years and years without success, and what that does to a player that believes they are good enough to go and achieve that success elsewhere. Let's take one or two more. Ian says, what really happened to Martin? He's our technical leader in the team. He's supposed to be our David Silva. He's the only player that has that ability on the ball, the close control, and finding passes. Honestly, it's one of the biggest mysteries around Arsenal. You know, I talk about the system. I talk about the prioritization of others, the platforming of others. And I think all of that plays a part. But just on an individual level, like there's something missing with Martin Odegaard right now. And I wish I knew what it was. But I don't. I just don't. Yeah, I don't. I don't know what it is. Let's take one more. What Sniper Scope was saying with the super chat was, what I mean is that City have the same output in the last 10 games. Haaland 1 goal, Doku 1, Foden 1. Yeah, but we keep talking about City as fluffing it, right? So we don't want to be in that position. We're striving for more. But I think what that highlights is that it's not easy to score goals like it used to be in this league, given the styles and the shapes and the systems that you come up against. So maybe that is something that we didn't highlight enough in the conversation. Nase says, you have a responsibility to push a positive narrative, not follow rival fans in the media narrative, support the club properly. This always makes me laugh when I get comments like this, because a month ago, I had people telling me that I'm a paid club representative and all this rubbish, that I'm not allowed to have an opinion and that I need to be more hard hitting and give my truth rather than what Arsenal want me to say. Arsenal have never told me I can or can't say anything. Okay. I say what I want to say. I say what I believe. Because I don't cross certain lines doesn't make me afraid of speaking my mind. I just talk with respect. That's the difference. Okay. To maybe how other people might approach it. But as I've said 1,000,001 times this season, I'm not going to sit here and moan about what other people do. It's up to them. And there's a world where that works and there's an audience for it and people enjoy it, and each their own, and fair play to them. I know that when I record this podcast every day, I'm honest about my opinions, and I am me. I talk like me. I talk how I talk when I'm talking with my friends, with my family, and in real life, basically, not behind the camera. So, yeah, I have a responsibility to push the positive when there is positive and to champion all the great things that we do. Absolutely. I think all Arsenal supporters, whether they do podcasts, write articles or not, have a responsibility to champion all the good things that Arsenal do. But when it's bad, you've got to call it how it is, because if you don't, then you lose all credibility. And what we saw on Sunday was bad. What we saw against Nottingham Forest was bad. The Liverpool game, not so much, but there was a frustration and a disappointment at the fact that we couldn't score. I call it how I see it. And, you know, I've been accused of not doing that in the past. It's never been true. I've always called it as I saw it. I've always felt that Arsenal under Mikel Arteta have been moving in the right direction, even if it was bumpy at times. But as I said at the start of this season, my expectations shifted. My view on what Arsenal should achieve going into this season is very different to what it was in previous seasons because of the squad that we assembled, because of the additional investment, because of the experiences of the past. And so I am going to be more critical because my expectation level's higher, because the standards that I hold Arsenal to this season are higher than they've been in a decade. Maybe it seems like I'm a bit moany or whatever, but I've also sat here and given you what I believe to be potential, and who am I? But I've given you what I believe to be potential solutions to the issues that we're dealing with at the moment. I'm not just moaning. It's easy to moan. It's easy to complain. It's easy to rant. I always think that that's fine when you're coming from an emotional place. But 2 days after the game, I think you've got to be able to draw a line under it. And you've got to start offering up solutions to the problem rather than banging on about the problem over and over again. That's just me. Anyway, thank you so much to everybody for joining us on today's episode. Remember, you can check us out on Patreon. There's a new Patreon piece out this morning. Go over and check that out. You can sign up for just £3 a month. You'll get access to all our additional content as well as ad-free versions of the full pod. You'll also get access to our Discord server, and you'll be supporting me to bring you this podcast on a daily basis. Like if you're with us on YouTube, subscribe if you're with us on YouTube, hype if you're with us on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us those reviews. They really do help, and reviews with comments seem to do better for some reason, I've been told, whatever that means. Get involved. Love to hear from you. Thank you all so much. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Tuesday. All the best. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.